So a couple weeks back, Ethan Klein went on a rampage on his Instagram stories where he basically argued with a lot of members of Hasan's community regarding the issue of what was Osama bin Laden's motives for 9/11. I think it's a very stupid thing. I feel like it just very much proves that Ethan does not have a real great understanding over the motives, because a big part of it played into America's interference within the region. But we're not going to be covering that today. We're just going to be reacting to this video of why his Leftovers podcast with with Hasan Piker is no longer here. And the reason why I'm interested in watching this is because the reason why I am very much set in my, the reason why I have the political beliefs I have today, and the reason why I have, the reason I make the sort of content that I make today is because I watched that podcast because I was an H3 fan. I remember the first episode I watched, it was after the Uvalde shooting. I definitely got very radicalized by that towards the left. And that introduced me to Hasan, that introduced me to his community. I started watching him a lot more. But the big thing is that I was an H3 fan first. I watched Ethan a lot. I really liked his videos. I just didn't really care for the Leftovers podcast because, I didn't even watch a episode because I was I'm not that interested in politics. But I started watching, and it definitely got me more into politics, and I became a Hasan fan as a result. So I definitely have I'm obviously going to have an interest towards this. So we're going to watch this video from North Star Radio, why the H3 Leftovers podcast will never return.
In 2021, Hasan Piker.
That's very patronizing. Yeah, I am being patronizing. I don't know who the you are, and you're over here chirping all the way from London about Palestine.
The biggest political Twitch streamer on the platform was blowing up in popularity, thanks in large part to his coverage of the 2020 presidential election following his controversial departure from the Young Turks.
America deserved 9/11, dude. I'm saying it.
At the same time, Ethan Klein.
Yay! What?
I'm surprised that didn't come into question here, which is also kind of funny. With this whole thing, I'm surprised he didn't bring up Hasan's comments during it. But Ethan brought Hasan on to his podcast after those remarks to basically explain what he meant. And Hasan explained it was because of our interference in the region, that's why he did it. And he agreed with him then. He was like, yeah, I agree with you. I just think the language is a bit weird. What he said was a bit much, which is kind of funny coming from Ethan. But also, how can he understand it then, but he doesn't understand it now? I think I think he has just grievances with Hasan, and he takes it out in his community, because the reason why they stopped doing the podcast was because of what's going on in Israel and Palestine. And the way that I can best explain it is that Ethan, I don't think that Ethan is I don't think he would identify as a Zionist, but he is very much critical of anyone who tries to use Zionism as a way to as a derogatory term. I think I just hate using it like that, because Zionism is not a derogatory term. He tries to inflate Zionism with anti-Semitism, which is not the same thing at all. And that is a large problem with it, and I think he kind of takes out those grievances that he has in this regard on his community, because obviously there is a lot of hate that comes from Hasan's community towards Ethan, but I think it's justifiably so with some of the things that he says on the matter, because he literally has said before that Zionism is just another slur for Jew, which is not. There are Christian Zionists.
Extra beef, extra.
Okay. Host of the biggest live podcast in the United States was also blowing up in popularity. Thanks.
Also, I'll probably ramp up the speed a bit, at least to 1.5, because it's been a long day already of reacting to some videos, and I'd rather we just kind of get it out of the way so I can play some video games.
part to Trisha Paytas and the falling out of their friendship, as well as their
At least turn subtitles on.
controversial podcast, Frenemies.
He says, don't talk about me on the podcast. All I said was, she have a guest. He's like, we can't mention English. When we talk about, oh, she's too good for a podcast, even though we were talking about, they never once insulted me at the beginning of spring. She has a podcast. I brought life to the nature.
Given the increased popularity of left-wing politics at the time, after the grand finale ending of the Trump presidency, these two controversial chronically online men decided to team up once and for all to bring to the internet the greatest political podcast of all time, that being the H3 Leftovers podcast. That's right. Years went by, delivering to knowledge-hungry young people the tools they need to build a better future for themselves and their communities. But this all came to a screeching
better
halt
days.
when one catastrophic event took place in historic Palestine on October the 7th, sparking hours upon hours of what at first seemed to be productive discussion, but what soon turned into quite childish one-sided debate.
If people are mad about that, it's probably because of the timing.
There's no timing placed on a group of people's emancipation. There's no, like,
Bro,
my
their timing matters. It's just this one point I'm trying to make. You can't cheer on Hamas, dude.
The flames grew higher and higher
My God.
until it was eventually too much for Ethan Klein, causing the Leftovers podcast to fall off the face of the earth with seemingly no announcement.
Yeah, like when that final episode dropped of them talking about, Israel's genocide campaign, to me that was just like, I just lost all faith in Ethan, like even being a fan of his. I tried to watch some of his videos, like afterwards, like months afterwards. He did a really good episode, like it did a really good episode of his podcast called, I forget what, Content Court, where it was basically them looking through all the terrible shit Aiden Ross has done. And that one was really good. It was a really funny one. But as soon as that came, like right after that came out is when the Aaron Bushnell situation happened. And the things that he said on that, I was like, okay, I got, like, never, like, I'm not going to give him a second chance. I gave him one and I instantly regretted it. But like, to me, that it just sucks. I hate that too, because the same thing happened with Cody Co. Like, I don't watch Cody Co anymore, but I used to a lot. I really liked Cody Co. I really liked his videos, but the fact that he is just so adamantly silent on the Tana Mojo thing, to me was just painfully disgusting, and I was just like, I can't support him anymore in any regard. Even if it's just watching old videos, I can't support him. And with Ethan, I was like, okay, he at least expresses sympathy for the Palestinians. I don't necessarily agree with him, but as long as he doesn't talk about it, I'll watch some videos. And then he said what he said about Aaron Bushnell, which I made a video about, and I just couldn't. I couldn't anymore. I was like, it feels like he's just not going to change on this. Also, I just really hate his behavior recently, because a lot of it just feels like he's just very chronically online, and I feel like it would just help him if he wasn't. Because, like, this whole thing, the way that it started is that he was reacting to a tweet that did not bring him up at all about Osama bin Laden and being like, oh, people just think that he just hated America and that's why he did so. Like, he hated that we had freedom. It's like, no, he didn't just hate that. He didn't hate that we had freedom. He hated America's actions in the Middle East. But despite the fact that he was not tagged in it at all, Ethan Klein took a screenshot of it, posted it on Instagram stories being like, look at this fucking idiot, shit like that, and it just spiraled out from there. Like, a lot of the things that he talks about, like, this whole situation with him arguing with people, it really only comes from him being chronically online and not shutting up, and just arguing with a bunch of people who have only, like, 1,000 or so followers on Twitter. Meanwhile, he has, like fucking hundreds of thousands of subscribers, of followers on his social media, and he's just blasting this random people to them. And I've seen, like, these people's interactions, they've literally had to, like, turn off comments. They had to go silent, go private, because people were sending them death threats because Ethan platformed these people.
This is what happened to the Leftovers podcast. And this is why the Leftovers podcast will never return. Today's broadcast is brought to you by viewers
Okay, we're
like
gonna
you.
skip
Become
this.
a member today and unlock a /Northstar Radio.
Oh,
Going
no.
back all the way to the beginning of the H3 podcast, politics was always being discussed.
Is that? Oh, fucking no. That's not Idubbbz, what's his name? Fucking, he makes music now. That's all I really know him from. I know he's like a former content creator, but I only know him from music now. I'm pretty sure that's
Peterson
him.
came on the podcast 2 times in the early days of his rise to fame.
You guys know who Jordan Peterson
In all
is?
fairness, he did delete those. I don't know why. he he seems to be very ashamed of those episodes. So he at least deleted the Jordan Peterson episodes.
Peterson is. He is like a psychologist or something, but he's
a scholar.
He's a scholar.
He's a really smart guy.
It's a very strange story in many ways because Hitler was obsessed with order and cleanliness. He was a very orderly person. He was very sensitive to disgust, because you think, well, the Nazis were afraid of the Jews, because they were other, and that's not right. What's more accurate is that, especially Hitler, he was very sensitive to disgust. That's what it looks like. If you're disgusted by something, then you want to eradicate it. Right? If you're afraid of something, you want to run away from it. If you're disgusted by it, you want to burn it to the damn ground. You want to get rid of it.
Andrew Yang came on the podcast 2 times in the early days of his rise to fame. And
this I would definitely be ashamed of, bringing on Andrew Yang. I'd be like, nobody can see this.
Political discussion shifted drastically to a more supportive, inclusive understanding of the ever-changing world around us.
This guy is the peace and love guy.
There's no such thing as trans people. That's something that you created.
Yeah, and this is the thing that sucks, is like, I don't think Ethan Klein is like a right-wing figure now. I don't. I think he definitely like has very strong opinions of being like on like gay people and trans people in general. Like, I don't think he's gonna do a heel turn and be like, oh, trans people are predators. Like, I don't think he's ever gonna do that. Like, I do think he is very much on the left. I just feel like when it comes to what's going on in Israel, he just has, and for at least somewhat understandable reasons, like his wife is from Israel. He lived in Israel for a time, but at the same time, it's just like, how can you see what's going on and not be disgusted what Israel is doing if you don't see these Palestinians as less than human?
So have fun with your little dreamland, but that's just not even real.
Take it from me.
Because if you honestly view Palestinians as human beings, you will be disgusted with what's going on, even a little bit. If you just view them as a little bit of human, you should be disgusted with what's going on. But he does, or at least like, I don't know, he puts a lot more effort in trying to be on the defensive for Israel in some cases, at least in terms of the framing of Zionism. In those sort of cases, like, he's definitely on the defense for that. But when it comes to, he's a lot more on the defense in that regard than he is in supporting Palestine.
Gay person.
Because in his mind, it's being, if you're pro-Palestine, you're pro-Hamas, basically. Or at least that's how he makes it sound like.
Dude, vagina, girl, done.
Slam.
Penis? Dude, I forgot about this. Oh, this is so great.
Come in here with that fucking
We got him again. Slam.
Penis, dude.
Boom.
But it wasn't until one fateful day when Ethan Klein and the H3 podcast decided to dive into the deep end of the online sphere of political commentary. That day was the beginning of the end for Steven Crowder.
Oh, there he is. Oh no, Sam Cedar. What a fucking nightmare.
Talking about fucking downfall.
Channel.
Steven Crowder has to have the biggest downfall of all time. Nobody fucking even likes talking about him anymore.
10 months after Hasan Piker made his first appearance.
Like, even people who like to make fun of right-wing grifters do not bring up Steven Crowder anymore. I believe he actually bots a lot of his audience at this point on Rumble.
The podcast, Ethan Klein made his first ever appearance on the Hasan broadcast to promote the release of this once-in-a-lifetime debate.
Boys, girls, Ethan Klein to the H3 podcast.
Are you pretty hyped up on the Crowder?
Oh my God, I'm so hyped up, dude. I'm so excited. Are you wearing holsters right now?
Yeah, yes, we're all wearing holsters.
Now, was the debate any good? Not really. They certainly got Steven Crowder to admit to quite a bit, like running away
from
it
was great.
With Sam Cedar.
It was fun, even though they didn't debate on a damn thing.
He admitted that he followed the show last week.
We got him.
He admitted that he watched the show last week.
We got him. Dude, we played him so hard because he literally was following. He saw that you went live. Dude, we got him.
Oh my God, we nailed him.
But most of the debate was pretty anticlimactic.
Yeah, he literally took the camera away from himself so he could, like, I don't know what Crowder was trying to do with this, but he showed it on his little minion, and you could just tell that he's just so uncomfortable. He's just like, oh, what am I supposed to do? Like, you just put the camera on me. And by the way, I'm pretty sure this is the same guy who, after he was fired, literally came out and talked shit about Steven Crowder, being like, no, he is a terrible boss.
I don't start a debate based with people on a lie. And how about you sabotaging? How about you
Steven, show yourself, you coward. Steven, show yourself. Show your co-host.
Oh, fucking hell.
A craving. He had one tiny droplet of debate pervertry, and he couldn't go back.
Yeah, I just skip forward there because, like, you probably have seen that clip. If you know about that situation at all, you probably have seen that clip already so many times. It's just so good of Steven Crowder just running away like a little bitch. What the hell? What is this?
day and night, week after week. Ethan Klein was not only debating the greatest of the great,
What the
but
fuck
was
is he
winning this
wearing?
debate.
No, I think it's more so.
Oh
women
my
pick
god, I
violent
remember
men
seeing
more
this
than
one.
Men pick violent women.
Based on what?
Um,
God, I just got done. Well, not just. Like a couple hours ago, I just reacted to the Jubilee video that she's on, the recent one, the men's right activist versus feminism. Dude, I feel like after this debate that she had with Ethan, that took place over a year ago from now, she should have just stopped doing debates altogether, but for some reason she still believes she can do good in one.
I feel that sometimes you argue from emotion rather than like concrete facts. I feel this to be true. Do you feel you do that a lot or no?
I'm a woman, so sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Interesting defense.
You're done with that shit? Can we talk like a
Oh my god. I remember this one. This was so good.
Watch me full screen cam, do the worm.
Do that. Bro, do it for a week. Do a week of no reaction content.
Yes.
See how many views you get. Oh, he's crying in the corner. Yeah, okay, sure.
I remember doing a video about this too. It was so fucking good. This was just so fucking good to watch. He literally just does the fucking worm. The best debate tactic he has ever done.
People like a 20-year-old dropshipper.
I'm just trying to flex on you guys.
But
I'm trying to
why?
show you guys.
Oh my
A pizza
god.
salesman.
All day when you need a friend.
A character from the Asian version of Get Out.
I identify as Korean.
A Quebecois.
A carrot.
And even a man from the Nexium cult.
I got on the bus and they made an announcement about my Tourette syndrome. And earlier in line, a lady.
Oh, I don't even know about
saying
this
some
one.
inappropriate words, and she stood up and she said, "Well, how come he can say this word?"
Okay, that one was actually pretty well done.
Let me, I have a theory for you.
I'm ready.
Okay, cool. I think you actually fake having Tourette's. Yeah, I don't think.
Why does he look like Austin Show?
I think you actually don't have it. Here's my.
What did you think I had?
Well, let me just break it down. I think this is kind of a funny thing. I doubt this is what happened, but maybe you just called someone the N-word on the bus, and then you're like, oh no, I have Tourette's. As somebody with Tourette's, I actually have Tourette's. I know it's not curable, so I just find that claim to be absolutely a pseudoscientific, crazy claim that has no backing in science or at all. And I think you're actually, in my opinion, as someone with Tourette's, I think you're scamming people.
Did you say that you have Tourette's?
I do have Tourette's.
I didn't know
Isn't that crazy. Yeah, I know. That's why I was so surprised when you emailed me, because I was like,
At that moment, he knew he fucked up.
I have Tourette's. And what's interesting too, I've also talked about how much I hate Keith and Nexium and what a psycho he is. So when I got your email, I was like, this is incredible. And I could totally see how it is you fell into a cult, because you clearly don't do any research.
Mind you, this was all taking place in the same timeline of the Leftovers podcast. They began the show on September 26, 2021, and Hasan Piker, but I'll call him Piker, seemed a bit uncomfortable at first, just getting the feel of the room and his ability to speak at will. This also wasn't a brand new podcast, rather a brand new show on an already existing podcast, so it makes sense it'd be a little challenging for Hasan Piker to just jump right in. But after only a few episodes, everything was perfect. I had already been radicalized by Hasan in 2019 and 2020, but the partnership of my two favorite creators only grew my passion for politics even more. So during this time, Ethan and Hasan are...
I didn't even know about him until this, but mostly because, like, I think until I was introduced to Hasan Piker through the Leftovers podcast, I wasn't big on Twitch streaming at all. Like, I did not watch anyone. I did not... Like, at that point, I think the only Twitch streamers that I knew about were, like, Ninja, Tim the Tatman, maybe, but I mostly just knew him through, like, YouTube because I used to watch, like, basically I Do Work. But like that was probably the only ones I could actually like tell you. I did not know who like Ludwig was or like QT Cinderella. I heard of Pokimane. I think that was probably the only other one I could tell you about. Like I did not know the Twitch community or the creator space at all. But like so like for me it was very much like I very much just watched YouTubers and I watched H3 and that kind of got me into the whole thing.
Becoming best buds. They do a weekly show together. Ethan comes on the Hasanabi broadcast again. Hasan visits the H3 podcast again to help in the interview of Liver King. And during this time, Ethan is participating in debate.
I missed the Liver King era.
Hasan is watching these debates on his stream, supporting Ethan in his performance as friends do. Hasan would even text Ethan talking points during the debates.
This is from last year. It says, what the F is happening with gay people? 10 years ago, everyone called them F words, the F slur for gay people in high school. And today, 1 in 6 high schoolers claim to be gay.
1 in 6, so yeah, it's continuing. More and more people.
So do you miss the days when we could call gay people the F word?
No, I just think it's surprising. I think it's crazy that that's happened. It's been such a popular trend lately.
Yeah, but that's not true either, is it?
No, it is.
What's your data?
My cousins that are in high school. I talked to my cousins in high school. I talked to strangers. People liked that video and commented on it and said the same thing.
Oh, that's data. Never mind. Ethan got to bust out the left-handed. The number of people who are left-handed.
The amount of left-handed people back in the day was really low.
I sent it back.
Left-handed were seen as inferior, and they were forced to use their right hand more often.
Fucking backseat debating.
Demons, then the amount of left-handed people increased, and it became steady at what, like 10% or something?
12%.
12% is left-handed. It went up astronomically all of a sudden. Would you say people choose to be left-handed?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, but that'd be silly. Why would you?
You don't know anything about anything, and yet you still chirp on it. Why not chirp on this too?
But little did Hasan know, he was feeding the thing that would eat him. he was flying too close to the debate pervertry's sun. And all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, Ethan, sitting there with a very large debate ego, turned around to face towards Hasan and said, "Allow me to debate the master."
Oh my god, oh yeah, this goes into, I think,
Klein was having some moral.
I'm not sure if it was, I think this might have been on, like, social democracy that he tries to argue on.
Quandaries about his devotion for capitalism, where he enjoyed the freedom that came from capitalism, the ability to succeed.
Where he's like, I'm not socialist, I'm a social democrat. I remember that too, because they definitely got into a big argument regarding this. And this was one where I was just kind of like, I did not think it was going to be, I did not think it was that serious. I don't think it's necessarily, I think it's just like them arguing more about like how they believe a system should be run. But what it really just comes down to is that Ethan does like a lot of forms of socialism. He just wants them to be in the framework of capitalism. But what Hasan brings up in defense of not in defense, to argue against that is that because you're under this capitalist structure, there's always going to be some form of, I'm blanking on words today. There's always going to be some structure of taking advantage of the people, of the workers.
Nothing that came from capitalism, but was disheartened by the inequality that capitalism fosters.
I know that I'm a capitalist, so I've been trying to think, like, how do you square that with my other, like, socialist ideas? Like, I think the government should have guaranteed jobs for people that want to work, that pay enough for the minimum amount needed to have shelter and food. First of all, I think it's, like, the natural inclination of some people. Like, I don't think it's even realistic to say, I want to live in, like, a perfect communistic society, because that just doesn't work. It's antithetical to human nature. But I do think there are good things of capitalism provides, which is, I do think there's a sense of innovation that happens when people are motivated by money and pushed to, do certain ideas. I don't hate the idea of like people who can be successful. I think it's good.
Yeah, but you can still get that motivation from people who just want to better people's lives. Like, it doesn't have to be from money. Like, if you take that like out of the equation, there are going to be people who are motivated to do something just for the betterment of other people, or because they just want to, not necessarily for like a financial gain.
I think that capitalism is a more realistic system of governance than like fucking communism is. Communism never works because people are inherently corrupt, and whoever's in charge they're gonna be greedy, they're gonna be corrupt, they're gonna fuck everything.
Yeah, but I think, but you should want to, develop a system that makes it so that's not even a factor. Like, yeah, there's always going to be those type of people, but those type of people are going to thrive under capitalism, under some respect, and use that to, kind of take advantage of the people under them. If for socialism, yeah, there are going to be people who are always going to want more, but the thing with socialism is that you should develop a system where they can't take advantage of people for that.
Everything up. It doesn't make sense. Like, it's almost like weird virtue signaling to be like, I'm living in modern day America, but I want a full communist revolution. I'll take on humanity, dude. I am a capitalist. What do you want? You know what I mean?
I don't know how that's hypocritical. Like, I was born here. I'm forced to participate in it. I could go to another country, but I don't want to. I want to make where I am better. That's why I advocate for the things that I do. That's why plenty of other people who live in this country who describe themselves as communists and socialists do the same thing.
But the thing is, like, they think that like workers should share in the workers should get a % of your earnings, essentially, a percentage of their production. I don't agree with that. You're watching a capitalist pig. Deal with it.
And that's what I hate too. Especially as a H3 fan or a former H3 fan, a big reason why I did like their show, why I used to watch their show, was because I liked the crew as well. I thought Ethan was great. I also liked the dynamic he had with the crew. I thought they were great too. I really liked like AB, Dan, Zach, Olivia. I liked the crew. So for him to basically say that, it is also kind of heartbreaking, because it's also like, do you not feel like your workers, despite the fact that they do contribute a great amount to his whole production, like, it would not be as good as it is without them. Do you not think they should get a share in the earnings for this art that they are creating?
You guys are all like radical communists. There's that many radical communists.
They're not radical communists. Not everybody that's anti-capitalist is a communist.
It is kind of a radical take, that being like full anti-capitalist. I mean,
that's the thing I hate too, is that like Ethan can be very stubborn with his views towards the fact, like, if you disagree with him, you're all of a sudden a radical.
You're essentially advocating to change the entire structure of all societies today on Earth.
He really I don't know. I feel like he inherently just tried to demonize anyone who goes against him, and you could really see that with how he was talking about people during this whole Bin Laden discourse. They weren't saying that Bin Laden was a great guy. They were just saying, "Hey, you are misunderstanding his motives."
That's not radical.
Do you think democracy is a good thing? And do you think
They
democracy
weren't signing off that was a good thing. They're just saying, "Hey, there's a reason why he did it," and you're just portraying it as something else.
is what helps prevent?
Yeah, but
But like, whatever. We'll get to that.
obviously our democracy isn't perfect either.
Right.
You know.
But you think ultimately that being a democracy, living in a society that votes and has, the people agree on how who should represent us and who should lead us is something like that's a better system than like say China, right? Where they have a council of elites and somebody is elected from within, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what if we ran companies that way?
On the following Wednesday episode of the HD podcast, Ethan
I mean, that's a great argument. It's like, yeah, that would be great if workers got to pick who is, the head of the company, who gets to represent them and make decisions for them. Like, that would be great. There's no real argument against that.
once again brings up the capitalism discussion, stating that he's been thinking a lot about it and is looking forward to a further discussion with Hasan on the following Thursday.
Last week was the capitalism versus socialism week, but I have to tell you, I want to talk about it more tomorrow because I've been thinking a lot about it.
Right.
I do. I mean, that's what Thursday is for, right?
That's what Hasan's there for. You can talk about it.
Ask grifter dog shit moron motherfucker.
Right.
Yeah, I remember during this time I just kind of got bored with their discussion. Like, they brought it up one week and they were like, no, let's bring it up again another week. And I was just kind of like, okay, like, whatever. Like, I don't know why this is getting brought up. I think he just has a hard time dropping things. Being like, maybe not push forwarding. I think he honestly thought he was going to look great coming out of this, but it just kind of, I don't know. Like, again, this was just like a small part of it that I feel like definitely led up to the bigger breakup overall of the Leftovers podcast. But it definitely was a little part of the saga where I was just like, I just honestly just didn't really care all that much. Like, yeah, like, I didn't really agree with Ethan at all in this regard, but it was just like, it felt like they were just kind of going in circles, so I just stopped paying attention.
To be clear, I'm not a capitalist, I'm a social democrat.
Okay.
I think that distinction is important because people lose their fucking mind when I say, like, I'm a capitalist. They just think that I'm like some fat cigar-smoking boot on the worker's face, grind him into dust. You know what I mean? I'm a social democrat, motherfuckers. Recognize, bitch. But actually, I am looking forward to tomorrow because I have been thinking about it quite a bit.
Going into the discussion, Ethan had one overarching question.
What is it that social democracy can't achieve that socialism can? That's my question.
Okay. Let's talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Now, does Ethan actually want the answer to this question? Does he actually want to learn? Or does he simply already have an opinion on the subject he is willing to argue for hours? Yes. Ethan prefaces the discussion by saying he's excited for the conversation, as he's been doing a lot of research. That research being talking to ChatGPT.
I want to better represent my position because I don't really know a lot, and I feel like I've done a lot of research in the week.
I don't know. Maybe he was just doing that for a joke because he does honestly bring up ChatGPT. But it's just kind of thing like, I think that's probably one of Ethan's biggest flaws, and it's a big reason why I stopped watching him. When it comes to like very serious, well, I don't necessarily think this is very serious because it's just like them debating their beliefs on this certain structure with like nothing changing. It's not like we're going through a big economic change within the US of like reverting to socialism or whatever. To me, it's a big reason why the Israel-Palestine, their discussion on that very much drew me away from Ethan. Like, this didn't at all. I just thought it made the episodes boring. But like this, I don't know. I feel like the similarities with like this and with their debate on Israel, what it really showed is that like, despite learning, going out of his way and learning, looking at facts, looking at statistics, looking at history, he already has his opinion made. And instead of learning, and here's the thing, I'm not saying that he has not changed his opinion on anything. I'm just saying within these instances, it comes off as, I've already had my opinion, I'm not here to learn, I'm just here to argue. But I'm doing it in the framework of, I just want to have a conversation.
The conversation. So,
what did you do?
I don't know.
What kind of research did you do?
I had a very in-depth conversation with ChatGPT.
Respect. Okay, that's good.
I asked it really kind of.
Well, Bear thinks it's socialist, like ChatGPT socialist. So like, ChatGPT probably
ChatGPT
Lenin.
is
Right,
so
yeah.
real.
Yeah.
ChatGPT keeps it so real. You
Yeah,
don't even know.
ChatGPT Lenin pilled you.
They focus this discussion on a few distinct questions or quandaries Ethan is having with capitalism, and he's not as willing to learn as he originally made it seem.
And the labor class
I
still
feel like that's an
exists.
assumption. I don't know that that's true.
They first discuss his overarching question. What can socialism achieve that social democracy cannot?
So let's talk about this. Now, my first question is this. Given that, in a social democracy, we can regulate things like taxes, housing, higher education, sharing jobs, and all this kind of stuff, what are the problems in social democracy that we need socialism to address?
So social democracy is still capitalist, with serious, severe market regulations, right? The issue is twofold. One, social democracies don't address some of the domestic problems because when there's still capital accumulation.
But which domestic problems?
Domestic problems such as labor issues, homelessness, like there's no way to fully eradicate that because the inherent class contradiction between the owner class and the labor class still exists.
That's an assumption. I don't know that that's true. That there's not going to be homelessness in socialism, but there will in social democracy.
I don't know. I feel like I hate that little phrase of his of being like, well, I don't think that's true. Well, that doesn't matter. That's the facts. That's going to happen. Also, like, I don't know. To me, it feels like he just likes the idea of controlling people in a sense, or like being, I mean, I guess that's the best way I could put it, of being someone who, because he is the boss. He's the boss of his production. I think he just likes the idea of being able to control people, and if we were under a socialist, like a socialist government, a socialist economy, he wouldn't be able to do that. I don't know, maybe that's me looking way too much into it. I'm trying not to be like weird or parasocial about this, regardless of the fact that this is about some of my two favorite content creators, but at the same time it's just like, it gives off that vibe of like, why do you have all these socialist views but believe that we need to have we need to have capitalist, like we still need to be capitalist about it. It really just comes off as like you truly believe that there needs to be one person who doesn't represent the people under them that tells them what to do. You like that idea, and that's probably because you're in that position.
Democracy?
Well, the idea is that completely abolishing the profit motive in certain commodities like housing, for example, will address that problem, because then you're making housing specifically for need rather than so you can make money off of existing units.
But we acknowledge that in a social democracy that's run ideally, the homeless and whoever else needs a home for whatever reason would be provided one. So I don't understand what socialism does better in that case.
At the end of the day, these countries, the social democracies that we were talking about, still have a lot of wealthy individuals, a lot of people who are making money off of finance capital and capitalism in general, and their interests are always going to be to further erode the welfare state as best as they possibly can in an effort to claw back all of those areas that they could still technically
You're
privatize.
putting that on them, but that's not, if you have a strong social democracy, that wouldn't be possible.
Ethan then asks another question.
No,
he's
that would
quite
definitely
unwilling
be
to provide the
possible.
answer to. Are workers still being exploited if all their needs in housing, food, and healthcare are being met?
Worker exploitation seems to be at the heart of socialism.
Like, yeah, you could fix the problems for you could fix the problems for the workers. That doesn't mean that the people above them aren't going to still find ways to exploit them. Like, it happens all the time. Like, even if something gets a little bit better for our workers, people on top always try to find ways to exploit them even more.
And communism. Yes. And so I want to ask you this question. If an employee is fairly compensated, and by fairly I mean factors like work, compensation, they're being paid well beyond the means of living. If they're provided in all those ways that we see as important, is that still exploitation?
In the Marxist perspective, under Marxian economics, Marxist theory, exploitation is not a good or bad thing. It is just a thing that happens.
Okay.
And it goes back to something I've described many, many times over. There are two classes. There is the labor class, the wage laborers, the proletariat, and the bourgeois class, the capital owning class, right? Mm-hmm. And these two classes have two inherently contradictory interests. As someone who worked, you wanted to work the least amount of hours for the most amount of pay. Your boss, on the other hand, wants you to work the most amount of hours for the least amount of pay. This inherent contradiction is at the heart of capitalism and is how commodities are produced under a capitalist mode of production. When you have this imbalance, those who do have capital end up always being able to pay you much less than your actual output.
So that is what's happening now. So is it still exploitation of workers if they're fairly provided for?
Yes, because the fairness in this regard is not met on the metrics of like living standards, but instead on the metrics of what their output is.
If the employee is extremely satisfied, and they feel well provided for, who are you to tell him he's being exploited?
Ethan continues in his failure to learn and brings up a similar question in the field of workers' rights. Why should workers be given democracy in the workplace in the form of decision-making?
Just because someone believes they're not being exploited doesn't mean they're still not being exploited. Like, this is a great example of like the SAG-AFTRA strike. There are plenty of actors who saw no problem with what was going on, but they still doesn't mean that it was not going to negatively affect them, like what was going on in the movie industry or the entertainment industry. Just because there are people who don't feel like they're being exploited doesn't mean they're not being exploited. Like, it's facts over feelings.
Profit sharing when they themselves did not create the business.
I want to give you a specific example because this is interesting to me. Let's just take this workplace as an example because we're all familiar with it. I started my career 10 plus years ago and I was successful by myself with 0 employees. I made a lot of money. I did well for myself. And then, 5 years ago into my career, I made the podcast, which obviously you all are watching now. Let's say we go back to 5 years ago when I hired Dan as a freelance. You started as like a consultant.
Yeah, or a freelancer. Yeah.
And obviously you moved to full time and I'll get to that. So he started as like a freelance consultant. What would be a fair way of compensating him for that?
And when Hasan gives him an answer, Ethan no longer wants to talk about it.
I just want to know how the socialist workplace works. It seems so nebulous when you talk about it.
Why is it? I don't think it's nebulous at all. I have a living, breathing, working example of it that I've given you.
I know, but like, there's got to be like a constitution that says outlines, or I don't know, whatever the fuck you want to write, right? There's got to be something, and it says like, or rule laws that says, this is the minimum that a person should get from the company.
Yes,
and
it should be married to the output. It should be married to the productive forces. It should be married to the output. That should be pegged.
We talked about this enough, though. I don't
that
want to
should
bore
be
people.
pegged to the performance, and I think that is the best possible way to work.
I guess my problem on that is like, how could you possibly
enforce that?
No, not even enforce. How could you possibly even analyze that? Like, how much more
that's
more money are we making because the janitor comes?
That's where we go to the Walmart example. That like we are already completely aware of that. We have actuaries, we have CPAs that are working in real time, making mathematical equations to figure out exactly what not to pay people technically, and they could be in a total social reorganization of the economy with a socialist dogma.
Okay. So
would work in the opposite direction.
Okay,
it's kind of like this.
Please, let's move to another topic.
Okay,
I don't want to bore
people. All in all, this episode was
like as soon as he goes on a roll, he's just like, oh, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Longer than usual, given how entertaining and important of a conversation it was. This Leftovers episode was definitely not a contributing factor to the conclusion of the Leftovers podcast, but it definitely was a sneak peek for what's to come. Ethan's debate pervertry ego.
Yeah, I don't know. Looking at the grand scheme of things, like you could look at that as like a small bump in the road. That's what it felt like at the time. I was like, it's just something I wish they would have gotten over with. Like, okay, you did 2 episodes on it. Let's move on from there. And, that seemed to be it. But then, obviously, what happened. But yeah, looking back on it, it obviously looked like a sign to come.
So after a few weeks,
at least in terms of like their disagreements with one another, because for the most part they always kind of seem to be on a pretty similar page. I think the only thing they really argued heavily on was like maybe it comes up here. It's like the fair use thing. It's a like React Gate, if you remember that. Like a couple months ago. Actually, no, it would have been over a year ago. Like over a year ago when they were talking about like XQC basically reacting to some guy's video entirely without barely saying anything and then uploading that to YouTube and being like, well, that's stealing. And I firmly agree that what he did was stealing, but then he got into like a not so heated argument. It was just an argument about it, but I wonder if that will come up here.
Episodes of the Leftovers podcast, something catastrophic took place, once again sparking the need for discussion
it probably
on
won't,
the Leftovers podcast.
Because they're going straight to this. But yeah, it was like a small little argument thing, but like at the same time, it's definitely one of those cases where I think it was like 2 people who wouldn't move on their positions, but one, I think, I don't know, when it came to this, I tend to agree with Hasan on a lot of his positions. With Ethan, it very much seemed like with the debate he was just talking about, as well as the fair use thing, it came from a very capitalist point of view.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Sciutto in Washington. It is now 4 a.m. in Gaza, where Israel is striking back at Hamas targets after these attacks we saw play out over the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country is at war. The militant group launched an unprecedented early morning series of attacks on Israel, firing at least 5,000 rockets. Israel says at least 300 Israelis are more than 1,500 wounded. This was not just rocket attacks, though. The terror group overran border crossings, invaded by sea, by air, and by land, taking over entire Israeli communities in the south. We must warn you, many of these images are graphic and frightening.
However, leading up to this episode, Ethan had some initial discussion of the October 7 attacks on October 9th.
So over the weekend, Hamas, who is the governing, they're an organization, but they're also control Gaza Strip. They somehow managed to put together this surprise invasion into Israel, and it was horrific. So far, at least 700 Israelis, which is nuts. One of the crazy things was there was a nature party, a peace party, they actually call it, ironically, and I guarantee a lot of people there were pro-peace, who are anti Netanyahu and all that kind of stuff. And so
yeah, for sure, they're all young. Definitely that type of crowd that is unhappy with the government.
The really sad kind of crazy thing is that, I don't know if this has changed, but last that I heard, Hamas didn't even know about the party. They just happened upon it. That's that, ugh.
This discussion was pretty tame, and mostly understandable coming from two Israelis after such a catastrophe took place. Ethan even made sure to make his stance clear about the Israeli government. Not by speaking from the heart, but by reading a tweet of a Notes app screenshot from 2021.
You know what? Let me do this. Before I even talk about this, let me just tell you, first of all, just so it's not ambiguous about how I feel about this situation as a whole. Okay? Let me just say this. I tweeted this. I think this was when the IDF blew up some apartment building or some horrific shit in Gaza a few years ago. I said the Israeli government's making me sick, even if Hamas is operating.
Yeah, this is like a weird way to go about it, being like, well, here's something I previously said about it. Just like, you can speak on it now.
It doesn't justify the total destruction of that building. It's inhumane. Netanyahu's a piece of shit. Warmonger. It needs to go. As a dual citizen, I love Israel and the Israeli people. They deserve
like, it's a little different now that they just blew up a building, like back then, to where they are now. Like, obviously what they did back then is still terrible, but like, talk about what's going on now.
Believes in peace and not force and violence. The ultra-right Jewish settlers are among the greatest provocateurs in the world. They're shameless, hateful, fueled by religious zeal, and enabled by the Israeli government. I wish the settling and repositioning of Palestinian land would stop. I wish the bombing in Gaza would stop. Gazans deserve to live a life free of fear. For all the crimes Hamas has committed, we must always remember that they are not Palestine. The Israeli government holds all the power and is on them to stop the violence and show a true willingness for peace. Okay, so just so it's not unambiguous.
Now, I wouldn't say this discussion was completely tame, as Ethan got quite caught up in the timing of it all, criticizing people for saying free Palestine as the attacks were taking place.
I think what people don't understand when they say that is like what it means to somebody in Israel who's going through grieving right now with so many people around them and their life as it used to be. Nobody knows right now what to expect and how long this war is going to last. Like, when you come out and say free Palestine after they just lost everybody, they have children taken away from them, that's not, if you're really for humanitarian reasons, that's not what you should be saying right now.
And I'm free.
No, if you're for humanitarian reasons, you would look at the vast amount of history of similar shit like this, where fucking Palestinians have been fucking taken advantage of and slaughtered by the Israeli government, and you would be like, no, that's objectively the humanitarian opinion to go through.
Palestine too, right? It's just the timing. I know what it is. You're saying I support Hamas. I mean, that's what you're saying. Maybe not even intentionally, you know.
But it might not be intentionally, but that is what it means.
Now, as I've explained in a previous video, the news break was quite vague at the time. So much of the breaking news was focused on the destruction of the Gaza wall and the escape of Gazans, not the mass atrocities. So hearing the great news of Gazan freedom, I and many others were quick to say, free Palestine. But for the most part, this reaction from two Israelis was understandable. For the most part.
Ethan, please learn more about this. Shut the fuck up.
What was not so understandable was Ethan's reaction and commentary in the following H3 podcast episode, where for whatever reason, Ethan decided to pick a fight with a Muslim woman, who happened to be one of Hasan's mods, a Lebanese Twitch streamer by the name Frogan.
I don't know if this is drama. I guess this is turning into a drama that I can talk about. Is that this girl Frogan?
Frogan.
Oh, Frogan? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. I don't even know how to say her name. I just followed her because, you know, there was a lot of mutuals that were following her, and she seemed like a nice person, so that's why I followed her.
And before we get into this whole thing, a thing that comes up when this discussion, because this is not the only instance of Ethan going after Frogan, something that people will bring up to criticize Ethan is that she is a smaller creator. He obviously has a way bigger platform than she does. Why does he keep going after her? And that's fair. Like, I don't know why he's going after this, like, smaller creator. Like, you could say that about that one, like, Manosphere guy, like the very young guy that he brought on. But at the end of the day, what he was basically arguing there was the Manosphere views that this guy had. And understandably, which are very much a detriment, so he would debate him on that. But to be like, hey, look at what this mean person said, who I mostly align on a lot of issues, it's just, I think it's incredibly bad thing to do for him.
She was a mod for Hasan, and me and Lena are friends with her as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just quietly unfollowed her, okay? I didn't like the tweet she was making. I thought they were, like, leaning too much towards pro-Hamas, and I just didn't like it. I didn't want to see it. And so I quietly unfollowed her. I didn't make a big deal. I didn't say anything. But, like, she got to turn it into this whole big thing that turns into a drama that's now being posted all over the internet. I'm sorry. It's a Twitter follow. It's not that serious, okay? First of all, and foremost.
The messages that, like, were shown, she didn't make tweets about it. She made Discord messages. She wasn't trying to blow it up on the internet. She was talking to a community that she is a part of. Like, she wasn't publicly making tweets being like, Ethan Klein unfollowed me.
That face when one of your favorite content creators unfollows you for being pro-Palestine. Like, first of all.
Like, she doesn't even mention him.
The framing of that is f***ed up, okay? Let's not even go there. You don't even know why I unfollowed you. You don't know, you don't have no information.
I mean, you kind of did. You said she was being too pro-Hamas, which is just kind of a Zionist way of being like, no, you're being too pro-Palestine.
We've never even talked. She said, Ethan Klein followed Frogan. Ethan Prob was like, this damn Arab supports Hamas. That's not funny. That's not funny at all. Like, the whole framing of this is really cruel. Ethan, I'll support the IDF. Refollow me. I don't support the IDF either. It's not funny. The reason I unfollowed her, because apparently she wants to know, is because of this tweet specifically.
Leftists preach and foam at the mouth at the thought of a revolution happening in America, but as soon as it happens in the Middle East, what they're doing is wrong. I mean, she's right.
And a few others, but this is the one that I was like, I don't want to see this anymore. She said, leftists preach and
like, yeah, I don't think what, Hamas did on October 7th was great. I don't think they should have been killing innocent Israeli people, but at the same time, I understand why they were doing it. Like, I understand what leads to that.
At the mouth at the thought of a revolution happening in America. But as soon as it happens in the Middle East, what they're doing is wrong. She's implying that what Hamas is doing is right. I mean, she's basically all but saying it. She's saying, as soon as a revolution happens in the Middle East...
I mean, do you think the American Revolution was wrong? We killed a lot of British people.
Then all of a sudden what they're doing is wrong. She's saying, in her opinion, that what they're doing is right, because it's a revolution.
Ethan once again speaks from the heart, saying, this was the last time I spoke about Israel, before once again bringing up his 2-year-old notes app screenshot.
She says, I've only ever heard you talk about me supporting Palestine. Are you dumb? Like, how dare you even say that, you scumbag? Did you think about this before you wrote it? Shame on you. How dare you defend what you said? And to even come for me as if I don't support Palestinians. This is the last time I ever spoke on Israel. The Israel government is making me sick. Even if Hamas is operating out of civilian buildings, it doesn't justify the total destruction of that building. It's inhumane. Netanyahu's a piece of shit warmonger and needs to go. As a dual citizen, I love Israel and the Israeli people. They deserve a government that actually believes in peace and not force and violence. The ultra-right Jewish settlers are among the greatest provocateurs in the world. They're shameless, hateful, fueled by religious zeal, and enabled by the Israeli government. I wish the settling and repossession of Palestinian land would stop. I wish the bombing in Gaza would stop. Gazans deserve to live in a life free of fear. And for all the crimes Hamas has committed, we must always remember that they are not Palestine, which somehow you don't seem to understand either. The Israeli government holds all of the power, and it's on them to stop the violence and show true willingness to peace. That's the last time I talked about Israel. Do you want to keep saying this shit about me, or do you want to apologize? Because it sounds to me like you want to double down. You said Hamas was their prison guards. Kids, you psycho. They're children with a machine. Dude, that's the prison guard you're talking about? And then you can't possibly understand why Israelis who are dead wrong are being like, oh, we need to retaliate. They're dead wrong. But you don't understand why they would think that. Again, because I have to emphasize, because people don't listen to what I say. I mean, I said it so many times, and yet she still acts like I haven't said it. It's astonishing, frankly. It's astonishing. This statement has made her original one even worse. She's basically just coming out and saying it. Yeah, Hamas are freedom fighters, taking out their prison guards. Oh yeah, and by the way, Palestinians. She's calling Hamas just Palestinians. How does that help them?
So yeah, that was probably the least productive.
Yeah, because they are. They're Palestinians who formed a group in result to Israel's occupation of them and their treatment of them. Like, there's plenty of people who, when October 7th happened, were just Palestinians who are now members of Hamas in order to fight back.
Productive commentary on the subject that could have ever taken
Like, that's
place.
not a hard thing to imagine that people who are under constant threat of another government would try to group up together. That doesn't mean I support Hamas. There are plenty of, great people within the Palestinian movement who aren't like Hamas, who want the emancipation of Palestinian people. Most of the time, they're assassinated by Israel.
Than they do about the lives of others. Mind
Or
you,
in
while
prison.
all of this coverage was taking place on the H3 podcast, Hasan Piker was also covering news out of Palestine. However, doing so in a much different way, a much more thorough way. Rather than repeatedly reading a tweet of his from 2 years ago, Hasan was spending 8 hours a day covering news out of Palestine, all the while not compromising on his values while losing viewership and followers because of them. So when the Inevitable Leftovers episode took place, the two co-hosts had quite clashing perspectives. In one camp, you had someone distraught over the loss of life, someone pushing for the full liberation of Palestinians as a preventive measure to make sure this never happens again. And in the other camp, you had someone distraught over the loss of life, but who was much more preoccupied in being optics police for the perspective he claims to uphold. And this was the perfect storm to bring us the sad, depressing, heartbreaking.
Like, I understand, wanting to, better a message in regards to this, but it's not the focus that you should be focusing on. Like, a lot of Ethan talking about Israel-Palestine over the last year has been on optics. It has nothing to do with what Israel has been doing. Like, he has said nothing in result to the World Central Kitchen, as long as I know, and I could be wrong, just to be fair. Like, as far as I know, he has never publicly said anything about World Central Kitchen bombings. He has never said that. And that's just one instance of Israel doing something completely fucking disgusting. Out of many instances. He has never talked about anything like that. He always talks about it in terms of how people on the internet are talking about it. He's only been talking about it through optics. So yeah, when he says, when he, So when he like talks about that and he mentions, well, I think Palestinians, are definitely harmed by the Israeli government, it's going to ring more hollow because you're not saying that in the context of a terrible action Israel has done. You're saying it in the context of you arguing against people who are pro-Palestine, against fucking optics. It's just so dumb.
Final 4 hours of the Leftovers podcast.
We're going to be discussing the conflict between Israel and Gaza that's happening right now. Obviously, there's been a lot of emotional, charged stuff going on. If people like me and Hasan, which are basically so close to the same ideals, can't have an amicable conversation about it, then there's no hope for anybody.
Once again, Ethan speaks from the heart.
And there's no hope for everyone. There's no hope for anybody because they ended their podcast after this.
And is definitely not reading a statement he made 2 years ago.
And I like to say this at the top because people are always going to call me a Zionist. People are going to call me a IDF supporter, genocidal, all this shit. And I've been saying it every day.
He's like, yeah, I'm not a Zionist. I just really hate it when people use the term Zionist.
Every time I can say it. So if you see anybody saying that, they're liars and bad faith weirdos. So here's what I'll say about Israel, okay? Listen, this isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs, okay? They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal, okay? He's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis. And they're hell-bent on genocide, frankly, overtly.
I mean, most of Israel supported his genocide. Most of them did. It's largely, after October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu became insanely popular. The only reason they started protesting him is because they were killing fucking hostages. They don't care about Palestinians. They just care about their own people. He grew immensely popular.
Children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18, so when you blow up a building, the chances that your children is pretty much 100%.
Hasan Piker starts the show with a pretty unique perspective on the events of October 7th, at least when compared to opinions typically expressed on the H3 podcast.
I think Edward Said said it best that it is not about, it's not even necessarily about designification of Israel. It's about maintaining peace so that everyone has a right to return and be able to live comfortably in their own homes. This area of historic Palestine did have Jews, Christians, and Muslims living side by side. Before the 1948 Nakba and before the British occupation. There was a time where there was peaceful coexistence.
Hasan explains how both sides have the same goal, peace. But peace is impossible to foster with the current design of the State of Israel.
What you just described, especially in the West Bank, which is settler terrorism, at least according to international law, and it's fully understood to be an illegal occupation, demands constant military support. Because you cannot, over the course of 75 years, build settlements and act like you are turning a blind eye to it, maybe sometimes halt it, maybe sometimes continue those operations of building said settlements, bulldoze homes, build roads that specifically partition off areas where Palestinians are supposed to be living on their own land in the two-state solution that has been reaffirmed time and time again. You can't have that be your peaceful coexistence project and not recognize that of course Palestinians see that and think, okay, well, what the fuck are we supposed to do? There's no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet the Palestinian Authority is collaborating with Israeli security operations, giving up 14-year-olds that were throwing rocks and shit like that, while they're losing their land, they're losing their homes. The area, according to B'Tselem, which is an Israeli organization, the area of West Bank of all of the agricultural land and all of the partitioned off lands that have been expanded into through settler, which is completely illegal, went from 10% in 1967 to more than 75%. The areas that are partitioned off also have no contiguity, which means that if you are Palestinian living in your own home in the West Bank, in order to get to your uncle's house, for example, you have to go through.
All right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna get some
there are
food, just snacks ready, because it's getting pretty late. I'm getting pretty hungry.
Versus Israelis living in the West Bank. Violence is a necessity in the maintenance of such a structure, which now many NGOs and even former Israeli officials are considering is an apartheid, and it has been for some time now. Of course, that violence that Palestinians endure on a daily basis is going to create more reactionary forces within it. More reactionary forces are going to be seen as the emancipatory forces when an irredentist power or an imperialist power goes and tries to seize land that it does not own. This is the second part of the brutality of the occupation that has made it seem as though Palestinians have no choice, that has created no opportunities for them, that has led to Hamas being able to seize more and more power. after being democratically elected one time in 2006, pretty much.
And then Ethan once again brings up optics, making it seem as though the reason Israel is so far right is because Israelis see tweets from angry Zoomers and think of the outside world as something scary, something that is always trying to attack them.
So when Israelis see a ton of leftists talking about, go Hamas, cheering on Hamas, or saying like super hyperbolic shit about like civilians are all settlers, or or saying shit like listen, it's a revolution, what do you expect, like what is a revolution supposed to look like, or whatever of all of these qualifiers basically that people want to make. The Israelis see that and they say, oh, these people just hate us, they just want to kill everybody, that's why we're going to vote for these bags.
So many people in Israel just feel like it's an existential threat. It's just this, everybody wants us. That's how we grow up. I grew up like that. All of our borders, they all want us.
Rockets are always coming over.
I was afraid to go on a bus as a child.
And again,
it's like that's your life. You're under threat all the time.
And Hasan brings up some very crucial context.
I mean, we don't have to get into like the history of why Jewish people would be understandably paranoid and worried, considering how they have historically been singled out as villains every single time.
So you would understand it's hard for some people to distinguish. No, I know you do, but 100%. I'm just saying this.
100%.
You might understand how it's hard for some people to distinguish anti-Semitism between like criticism, especially when it's like a criticism that's very lax on violence against Israelis.
So you're absolutely correct on that front. Here's what I will even dive into further, and this is something I talked about on my stream as well. The paranoia now that manifests inside of Israel, as far as I understand, I don't live in Israel, I've never been to Israel, at least from everything that I have read on not just Israel, but also apartheid South Africa and the Algerian anti-colonial action against the French. The paranoia manifests and becomes a part of your identity because of the violence that is a necessity for the maintenance of apartheid.
But Ethan doesn't quite get it.
Look, Israel was under threat before all this shit happened. I mean, from the moment Israel was established, the neighbors were trying to kill them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we agree on that.
Really?
I will say that I think that Nakba was an unjustifiable act of violence that was the formation of the state. Now, you can say every state is formed through an act of violence. All enclosures are defended through acts of violence, certainly. But I think that there was, this extends, like what you say to West Bank, what you say about West Bank settlers was the original position of the Israeli state's formation.
Ethan actually brings up optics several times throughout this discussion, like tweets from Mia Khalifa.
It's the timing, dude. It does matter.
There's an asymmetry to the violence, but there's also an asymmetry to the coverage as well. Mia Khalifa is a good example. You and I were talking about this on the phone earlier. Mia Khalifa said things that I find to be distasteful and wrong. Okay.
Worse than that.
I think it was distasteful and wrong. I think that it was callous. However, the reaction to Mia Khalifa has never ever occurred on the other side.
You're right.
When Israel is engaging in bombing campaigns, and like you said, the horrific images that you saw, Palestinian fathers holding their daughters. There is no equivalence. I think a lot of people who have been advocates for Palestinians for many, many years, especially if they're Muslim, know this reality that you have to be incredibly careful all the time with your rhetoric, and that even in an emotional moment, you can never actually you can never say something that will be misconstrued. And Mia Khalifa said something that was inappropriate and unacceptable.
She showed a picture of roaming in a pickup truck murdering civilians. She described that as a Renaissance painting.
Yeah,
I mean, that's worse than unacceptable.
So
it's evil.
So you're correct on that.
Okay.
So let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
When Lindsey Graham goes on and says this is a religious war and we must ethnically cleanse, we must wipe.
Okay, we're gonna go back a little bit. I've been listening to it while I was making food, so we're gonna go back a little bit.
With your rhetoric, and that even in an emotional moment, you can never actually you can never say something that will be misconstrued. And Mia Khalifa said something that was inappropriate and unacceptable.
She showed a picture of roaming in a pickup truck murdering civilians. She described that as a Renaissance painting.
Yeah,
I mean, that's worse than unacceptable.
So
it's evil.
So you're correct on that.
Okay.
So let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
When Lindsey Graham goes on and says this is a religious war and we must ethnically cleanse, we must wipe our enemies.
Should get the same coverage.
No, I know, but it doesn't, Ethan. That's the point. Like Marco Rubio has called for ethnic cleansing. These are people in positions of power. These are people who are literally facilitating in the shed. These are people who actually are engaging in the continuation. These are not former stars who were.
Yeah, this is like Hasan's literally like, hey, people of power are saying this. There needs to be an ethnic cleansing. People who literally hold power, who can, advocate for these things and have it happen, are saying these people should be genocided, and you're saying that a porn star said a mean thing, so it's bad. Ethan's just like, but this person online said mean things. Doesn't matter. There's people literally in power who don't get any shit thrown towards them, who are literally advocating for a genocide.
Christian Lebanese who now
whatever, dude. She was getting a lot of attention. People were liking it. It wasn't like, but here's the problem.
And you don't think Lindsey Graham is doing that as too? Like, you don't think Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio are going to get the same level of attention? Who fucking cares about Mia Khalifa anymore?
Meaningless is what I'm saying in the grand scheme of things, because that doesn't
Hasan, let me make my point.
Honestly, throughout this entire video, it feels like Hasan is telling two Israelis things about Israel and Israeli history they've never heard before.
Benjamin Netanyahu, when in 2008, people living under brutal occupation in the world's largest open-air prison in Gaza, where 2 million people live and 47% of that population is under the age of 14 and under, they did a peaceful march, a demonstration for a right to return. Thousands of children, babies, and adults alike were ruthlessly at by Israeli snipers in that right to return as they walked and demonstrated and walked towards that fence, walked towards that border fence that traps them inside of Gaza. Thousands.
And at the same time, it feels like Ethan and Hila are tag teaming to dish to Hasan every single Israeli propaganda point ever concocted.
My generation's grandparents are people that survived the Holocaust, and they escaped to Israel to start a country for Jewish people because they were, we all know the Holocaust. And what happened this time is a really scary reminder to all of us Jewish people. And that's how I feel, at least, that it's a reminder. The Holocaust wasn't that long ago. What happened this time is really scary, and it really does bring up this topic. And
see, I don't think that you can even say something like that without starting a debate, and I don't think that's right.
The reason why people...
They're like, you don't understand. Don't get me wrong. Holocaust, terrible fucking thing. Not defending that at all. Fuck that. But just because you are a part of a group that was ethnically cleansed, just because you are part of a group that was ethnically cleansed does not mean you have the right to go to another country, try to ethnically cleanse those people, take over their land, and continue that style throughout many, many years. Like, yes, what happened to the Jews, like what happened to Jewish people after, like during World War II, during the Holocaust, was fucking terrible. It was fucking terrible. Obviously it was. That does not mean that the Israeli government has a right to just slaughter many Palestinians and take over a land that isn't theirs. It's disgusting. Also, Israel does not treat their Holocaust survivors that well. They don't.
Would react to it, or even myself, as a matter of fact, would react to that is because while you're absolutely correct and your feelings are totally valid, what is happening currently is a ongoing, at least 75-year campaign of ethnic displacement upon people who had nothing to do with the Holocaust. And that is... And
dude, we're just talking about the Israeli psyche. I
understand.
Hila, having grown up in Israel, really sheds a light during this conversation of the propaganda drilled into the psyche of every Israeli, likening the October 7 attack.
He's like, how dare you show sympathy towards the Palestinians? You had to show sympathy towards the Israelis and Israelis only. Like, yeah, obviously that's going to be... Like... Yeah, Palestinians had nothing to do with the fucking Holocaust. What are you talking about? So what does the Holocaust have to do with any of this? Like, yes, it was post-World War II. Obviously, a lot of Jewish people were shaken by that. It was very recent. But at the same time, that does not mean that they get to do the exact same thing to fucking Palestinians.
To the Holocaust as a targeted attack against Jews for the sole reason of them being Jews, that's a pretty wild statement. Time and time again, throughout this entire discussion, Ethan was really pushing only for one point: mutual empathy. When Hasan tried explaining the experience of Palestinians in Gaza, Ethan would always say, I know that, and Israelis are also living in fear. You know, the same argument as all lives matter.
And it's important to say this is not about right or wrong. It's about having empathy for the Israeli experience. I feel that a lot of people, not all, even a minority, but enough that it's noticeable, don't have that.
Yeah, I have so much empathy for a group of people who get to just live their lives, go out, have fun, while another group of people in the same land are getting bombed by their government. Like, not that far away. I have so much empathy towards those people, like towards both people. The people who do not have to worry, who just get to live their lives while their government slaughters thousands of people. And they support it.
That level of empathy where they see Israelis as like full-blown diverse human beings. How is there ever going to be peace, like genuinely, if there's not empathy to at least understand? Like I'm not to agree with, but to at least understand.
At a certain point in this discussion, Ethan decided once again to bring a friend of Hasan's into the conversation, specifically to call him an evil person.
At this time, I want to turn my attention to some of the very evil takes I've heard some prominent folks making about Israelis. Here is one such example of a dude, and this guy is very popular. He has 1.6 million subscribers. He is a very popular political YouTuber called Second Thought. Sorry.
Oh yeah, he's my friend. I like JT.
All right, well then You tell me what you think about this. So here he is doing a podcast.
I've been on. I think is this deprogram? I've been on the podcast.
I don't know what it's called, but this is just a clip from
Yeah.
So here's his take on this.
Did the Palestinians actually take civilian hostage, or is that fake news? I don't care.
Yeah, the occupiers
I
are
do not.
not civilian.
First of all, just straight off the bat,
The person that's talking is Hakim. He is a doctor in Iraq, and of course, just to put this into a decent frame of reference for those who are unfamiliar, I think he will probably have a much more ruthless position on the matter, considering how he feels about American forces and what they've done to his
this
home
I'm pretty sure is
family.
all second thought.
No, the one who said.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Here.
Did the Palestinians actually take civilian hostage, or is that fake news?
So wait, who's talking there?
That's Hakim.
The occupiers
I
are
do
not
not.
civilians. That is what it comes
Yeah.
down to. Like if imagine
French-
if
Sorry, go on.
Germany, let's say Germany to be non.
That's him, right?
I think. Yeah, I think so.
Controversial.
And not that it matters.
invaded the United States, and they said, you know what, Cincinnati, Ohio is our ancestral home, and everyone knows that's blatantly false. But they take your home, they murder your grandma, they bulldoze like your neighbor's house. Are those people civilians there? No, they're occupiers, and those are criminals. That is, there are no civilians there. And
So-
So according to second thought, he says that every Israeli is an occupier, and there are no citizens there.
There's two different schools of thought within, I would say, anti-Zionism. Those who believe that all matter of settlements that were propped up even in the inception of the Israeli nation state are unjustifiable, and that they are settlers. So they extend beyond your perspective that you agree with, which is
because-
West Bank is a settler occupation.
I think it's an extremely evil thing to say. Do you think what he said is evil?
I think it is, one, unproductive, and two, it does not meet the realities on the ground, and it's not a viable solution.
So calling, just to be clear, calling babies
No, of course not.
settlers.
Of course,
And they're not even living.
They're not.
Okay,
Yeah, they're
okay.
babies.
So I just want to say,
I have a question for you.
that this guy's a fucking evil piece of shit for saying that.
Can we?
This conversation
Jesus
eventually
Christ.
got to a point where Ethan was just far too focused on the optics of it all, to the point where Hasan was basically laughing at Ethan for how silly his frustrations were.
Well, let me ask you this.
What's up?
A fan of Second Thought who's listened to him dehumanizing Israelis that way, do you think that listening to him might inspire one of those people to be like, hey, I'm going to go join this,
What, Hamas?
Well, no, I mean, it's according to it's a pro-Palestine.
You think a fan of Second Thought is going to see? Okay, let's walk through it. You think a fan of Second Thought is going to see that and be like, I'm going to go to Gaza. I'm going to join Hamas.
That's not what I said. I said he's going to go down to the Upper Sydney at this location and be like, hey, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. Like he would just bring up random clips of people who were being anti-Semitic and being like, no, this is pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas people.
The Jews. Everyone's saying it. Nobody seems to care.
I guess it could happen, certainly.
Okay.
I'm still thinking about a Second Thought YouTube fan being like, I'm going to go rise up in the global jihad and rise up against Israel and purge it.
I understand that.
May Allah guide my weapons.
But this still wasn't the end of Leftovers. Although being the final episode, Ethan and Hasan would meet one more time to further discuss Ethan's framing and overall understanding of the conflict. This time, however, the conversation would take place on the Hasan Nabi broadcast. And this is when the prospects of the Leftovers podcast continuing were called into question, with the initial discussion revolving around the two-state solution.
So basically, I wanted to talk about specifically the one-state versus two-state solution. And my approach to this when talking about it is purely pragmatic, and I'm trying to be realistic. I think our goals are aligned in that we want peace, a lasting peace, a meaningful peace. I know it seems like impossibly far away, but I do think there are certain starting points that we need to come from and agree on before expanding out from there. And one of them is this issue. You don't believe in a two-state solution. I'm
I
assuming
used to be. I used to believe in a two-state solution. I was an advocate for a two-state solution, and I think like there are a lot of other people who also used to be two-state solutioners themselves that have changed their perspective dramatically over the course of the past couple of decades. Due to the settlements and the rapid expansion of settlements.
My question to you is this, and again, approaching this from a fully realistic perspective, what do you think would happen in the region that would result in Israel conceding to a one-state solution?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the greatest things that could happen in a one-state solution is that you completely limit, obviously we're talking about like a hypothetical future that is like very far away, where you completely limit Iran's power and exertion of influence over militant factions that are being currently used as a destabilizing force against Israel. The other states are not all that important, the only reason why I talk about Iran is because Iran is the only regional actor that is like genuinely anti-Israel. They see Israel as an expression of Western influence in the region, and of course they will use, like they have Hezbollah, another Iranian-backed movement that became a political party as well, as a consequence of like Israeli incursion in Lebanon as well in the civil war. And these are all opportunities for Iran to push back by way of Syria, by way of Iraq, by way of Lebanon, by way of the Houthis in Yemen. They would not be able to utilize these militant factions if there was a permanent peace solution.
So I guess I'll ask the question again because I'm not sure if it was answered directly.
But once again, what Ethan is really hung up on is optics. The optics of
Jesus
expressions
Christ.
used by supporters of the Free Palestine movement. Mainly, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
You were talking about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And
Okay, so like at worst, the worst interpretation of that would be like someone like Hamas or Hezbollah or like terrorist organizations who are like, yeah, we want to actually kill everybody there. That's the worst interpretation of it. I know that there's a lot of people, obviously, vast majority of people who do say that. don't want to kill all the Jews there, right? But like, so at the best interpretation of it, it basically means, as I've said, this one state dissolution of the state of Israel. And a lot of people also see that. I would say the vast majority of people in Israel see that as a genocide.
And no matter how many times Hasan tries to explain how unimportant
Doesn't
it is
mean
to
if they
focus on
see it
these
that way,
things,
that's not true.
when even many pro-Palestinian Jews use this expression, Ethan doesn't want to listen. Once again,
Yeah.
pushing some sort of all lives matter argument.
Jewish people themselves say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Jewish people are at the forefront of the anti-apartheid, anti-Zionist activism. Jewish Voice for Peace, Jews for Economic and
the existence of Jewish people doesn't. No, I don't. At that point, is not very persuasive. I mean, of course there is.
What do you? Of course, it's. I think it's very important
Because
if
there's
it was
Israelis that say it, and
no.
therefore minority or Jewish people shouldn't be offended by it because some people say it. I mean, there's an interesting phenomenon going on here where when minorities tell you they're offended by something, usually, especially liberals and leftists, they'll listen because it's not their place, right? They'll say it's not my place. If you say it, then that's what it is.
Yeah, but it's Jewish people who are saying that.
I mean, Jews make up 60% of all crimes in America right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when Jewish people look at that and they say, listen, it makes me uncomfortable the way that that's used. I find it interesting that people see that as an opportunity to argue.
Yes, people saying that Jewish people commit 60% of the crimes is the same thing as saying that Jewish people don't think that Israel should be bombing Palestinians.
Instead of listen, especially to me, it's like you can make the same argument about the Confederate flag, where Southerners will be like, listen, it's just about our heritage. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with racism. And maybe, and some people do believe that, right? But at the end of the day, if a black person is like, that Confederate flag is offensive to me, you're not going to argue with them and say, no, it's just heritage. Like, not everybody who uses it is racist.
Ethan even likens the organization Jewish Voice for Peace to Nazi collaborating Jews.
I'm not gonna talk about this as, like Jewish people in general. The reason why I brought up Jews for Jewish Voice for Peace and other groups using this as well, like Jews themselves in America using this anti-Zionist slogan, indicates that this slogan isn't one that is about the evisceration of Jews. If that was the case, then they wouldn't use it.
There was Jewish collaborators with fucking Nazis.
Ethan, don't do that, please. Don't say that the Jews' Voice for Peace are akin to capos. Like that's.
I'm telling you that the mere existence of Jewish voices is not a leg to stand on. I don't understand that.
Hasan is trying to do all he can to protect Ethan's image in this moment. Hasan is well aware that by Ethan saying these things, he's putting himself into a group he has no reason to associate himself with. He is begging Ethan to understand this for the benefit of his own public image. But for whatever reason, Ethan continues to push these dangerous beliefs.
It's like you're tokenizing a few Israelis. It seems silly. You're like, here, check out my Israeli. He says it.
That's not.
And I don't find it a good point.
This conversation was really the straw that broke the camel's back. And in a following members-only live stream, Ethan made it quite clear that leftovers will not be returning, as the discourse and criticism he's receiving for his coverage is all too much for Ethan Klein.
People are saying rip leftovers. Yeah, probably.
And shortly after Ethan made that statement, Hasan Piker on his own Twitch stream described Ethan Klein as his former co-host. But this still wasn't the end of Leftovers. Ethan made it clear that Leftovers was over, but with a chance of it returning in the future, given the fact that
I don't think that's gonna happen.
Election would soon be underway.
I need to look after myself at a certain point. You know, it's my life. To a certain point, it stopped becoming a show to an extent, or at least just, the very end of it. And, it's my life. So I have to protect the sanctity of that. That's why I'm probably going to not do it anymore. Yeah, it sucks that we're going to miss the 2024 election. Maybe we'll come back for it, I don't know.
But nearly 10 months later, it has yet to return. And this is why. Although the Leftovers podcast ended, mostly because Ethan was done talking about the subject and receiving so much hate because of it, Ethan continued to talk about Israel. And he even continued to talk about Hasan and people Hasan is associated with. But this time, now that they no longer have a show together, Ethan is a lot more critical. And he even continues to be an unproductive voice in the Palestine discussion, continually bringing up his problems with the left, and continuing to focus on optics and not the devastation.
It really pisses me off, because I never said a damn bad thing about that guy. And that's why I said, when you need to explain your reason for calling me a racist, calling me a genocidal Zionist, which by the way, Zionist, just another slur for Jew, being a Jew. You know how many people now call every Jew a Zionist? Just call me a Jew and get it over with. It's just the truth. I'm pulled myself all the way to, outright saying that it's apartheid, that's genocide, that the Israeli government is committing. And so, but you still call me racist and genocide. Why would you call me a Zionist when I have said all the things that you want to hear from me? When I meet you right in the you still spit in my face.
Literally him just being like, I've said all the things you wanted me to say. Why are you still calling me all these bad things? Because you say things that align with them. Like, I don't think he fucking supports Palestinians being bombed, but he seems to care a lot more about the optics of what it means to call someone a Zionist, even though when it's used truthfully for the most part. Like, yeah, Noah Schnapp is a Zionist. People don't call him that because he's Jewish. He literally has admitted himself to being a Zionist.
So give me a break. Who's the problem? Scumbag. Scumbag. I'm going to say this because it pisses me off. And being anti openly and proudly is now likes on Twitter. Rogan, she tweeted out, she goes, I have a problem with my Zionist therapist. Just call him a Jew. I'm sorry, but that you can't.
I remember that, and I remember her clarifying what she meant by that, and it had to do with her talking about her past and talking about her experiments with Israel, and how that played into a factor with, some of her poor history, because she is Lebanese, so obviously she's going to have history with some of the actions that the Israeli government has taken against Lebanon, and the therapist basically started yelling at her for that, basically supporting Israel.
Can't talk like that about any other minority. I have a problem with my Zionist therapist. What you taught your Zionist therapist? Did you get those level of details from them? You had an in-depth conversation about the politics of Zionism with your therapist? No, I don't. You mean you.
But really, the true reason that Leftovers has not returned in the past 10 months and will never be seen again is because Ethan Klein, a man once buddy-buddy with anti-social justice warrior opinions and creators online, pushing the same rhetoric himself, but later cleansed of those opinions, becoming a self-described social democrat supportive of progressive social and economic policy, he has recently once again become buddy-buddy with those on the right. The same people.
What? He had Bryce Hall on.
Progressive social and economic policy.
Oh yeah, these are recent too, because these are like celebrity. Like this is something that he has done himself. He has Steiny on from the Nelk Boys. Let's see, Steiny, Ethan Klein, Tam Mojo. I mean, that's not bad, but still. Where's Justice? I don't know. Like, I don't know. To me, it's not like. I don't know. I don't know why you would have Bryce Hall there when he's like proudly wearing a MAGA hat, because it's not supposed to be ironic. Like, no, he literally went on stage at a Trump rally to endorse him.
Once again become buddy-buddy with those on the right. The same people he spent day after day mocking, criticizing on his own show, are now people he is willing to once again open up to and accept.
He's recently become one of my best friends. Your best friend? We're close. We were supposed to come out here together, but he faded me, so.
Like, you guys want to see the real areas of Israel and their conflicts over here? Like, it's safe, but things can also go dangerous.
So we're going to be in Palestine right now?
Basically, we're in a tunnel. Above us is Palestine. We're heading to one of the most tense areas in the country.
We're taking us right into the heat of it, man.
I mean, I see his content, to be honest. I've seen mostly on TikTok. I see Destiny like debating red pill people and stuff, and in general, I think it's good. I like what I see on TikTok.
I don't know if it would qualify as the crime of apartheid. Just like if Israel were to literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of genocide.
In your eyes, probably not.
Oh my God.
Is why Leftovers.
I remember that debate. That was great.
Will never return. And that is why the H3 podcast is exponentially collapsing. But that's a video for another day. Thank you for watching North Star Radio. Peace and love.
Yeah, this was a great video. And that's also another thing. I feel like a lot of Destiny fans, especially in its regards to like arguing with Hasan's fan base, are kind of like taking advantage of that to kind of like sneak their way in. Honestly, I don't know if I would be surprised if Destiny becomes his next co-host or something. Honestly, at this point, but we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know if he's gonna make like a hard right turn into being like to go more conservative. He does have a history that might align more with that. Maybe at least more like a conservative Democrat route. But still, I don't know. This is just terrible. Like, I don't think Bryce Hall and Steiny are necessarily a indicator that he's going to be like a right-wing grifter. But at the same time, like, these are two people who have like openly endorsed Donald Trump. And you're just like, yeah, I'm just like hanging out with them publicly, putting them on my platform. I don't know. It doesn't give me a lot of faith in what his future is going to be in regards to his views. But yeah, that's about it.